All right, welcome Daily Life. I am Vince Mercandetti. I am joined tonight by Doug Zimmerman. Doug is here to talk about a series of serious topics. Doug, you are a cancer survivor. You're here to talk about PTSD and also physical trauma. So let's dive into that. Well, you tell me, where do you want to start with all of that? When did all of this start, and kind of walk us through, your history a little bit?
Sure. I think probably the best place to probably start would probably be like it would have been the summer before my senior year of high school. So it would have been like July of 2002. I had been doing I was potentially going to play football on the football team senior year. And I had gone through a couple of like OTAs and done some workouts over the summer. And like I started getting this really bad back pain, and it was like just weird. Like it was lingering, it wouldn't go away. And so like I had gone to the doctor, and like they had me see an orthopedist, and the orthopedist is like, "You're 17, like there's nothing. I mean, it's probably nothing. Like you probably pulled a muscle. You've been doing, football. You probably pulled a muscle. Don't worry about it. It'll go away. Here's some muscle relaxers." I mean, because they were handing that shit out like,
Of course, yeah,
you know,
still are.
Tic Tacs. So I was like, all right. But this was around the time that my very evangelical Christian mother was forcing me to go to like all of these youth group events and stuff like that. And so I got roped into going on a missions trip to Mexico to build a house south of Tijuana for like a homeless family. And so like my best friend was going, and so like they kind of came to me and they were like, "Look, if you come on this trip, we'll kind of just let you do whatever you want, but like come on the trip." And so I was like, I don't really want to, but I'll go.
Free
And I
trip to
figured like, we
Mexico.
were gonna get like a day or two in like San Diego, so I was like, all right, like maybe like that'll be fun, so I'll go do that. And so I ended up going on this trip, and we were doing lots of like physical labor. We were like clearing off like a site and leveling it, and then we were building, we foundation, rebar, all that crap, and then we were building the walls. And so like one of the days, like I was having trouble sleeping laying down. Like my back was really bad, so I ended up sleeping in a van. We were staying at like this like sort of like wasn't like an orphanage, but like it was like like a place where like displaced children were living. And like
Okay.
it was like a religious, we went with the church. We were like staying at some
Yeah,
facility,
like a
and
compound
basically,
almost.
yeah, like everybody was sleeping in an empty pool, like
Yeah,
in sleeping bags. Like that was where everyone was sleeping. So I slept in the van. Um,
the story's already one of the weirdest ones I've heard, by the way.
and it's like hold on to your butts, because
Yeah.
like shit's about to get real.
Yeah.
So I wake up one morning in the van, and it feels like my legs are just asleep. I have like very, very little sensation, but enough to like stand and walk around. And we had a lady on this trip with us. I don't know if you ever knew the Brackies. Did you know Brian Brackey?
The last name kind of sounds familiar, and I should actually preface this for the rest of the group. Doug and I grew up together in the same neighborhood, so
Yeah.
we go way back to when we were children. Doug obviously is in Daily Life and some of the other life groups as well. Growing up in New Jersey, did not know your mom was evangelical. I knew that they were pretty religious. So that's now trivia number one that I'm aware of. I've heard of the Becky's name. I didn't know them personally though.
Well, so their mom was on the trip, and she was a Princeton Hospital ER triage nurse. And so she kind of was like a little concerned. She was like, "This is definitely not good. Like, it's weird. Like, it's definitely weird."
Yeah, it's
And
not a twisted muscle or a pulled muscle at this point if you're
well,
losing feeling in your legs, right?
right.
Yeah.
But like I was also on muscle relaxers, so like I wasn't 100% sure like if the lack of sensation had anything to do with just kind of being like hopped up on uh muscle relaxers.
Right.
But anyway, like so like we go out to the site for the day to work, and I'm like throwing a pickaxe and blah, blah, blah. And next thing I know, we're like 20 miles south of like San Diego. So you get these big planes coming out of San Diego International. And it like came over this like ridge where we were. And I like looked up, and next thing I know, I felt like something kind of like pop into place. And I lost every feeling from the waist down, and I fell over. And my best friend was with me, and he just turned around and he laughed at me. Like he
thought you tripped.
Yeah, like, or just like, and then I was like, bro, I can't get up. Like I can't walk. So they throw me in the back of a pickup truck, and they're like, well, we clearly need to get to a hospital. So I end up in a pickup truck going from Tijuana to Chula Vista, California, because I certainly was not about to have like spinal cord surgery
in Mexico.
In Mexico.
Yeah.
Tijuana specifically.
Yeah, you're like a drug mule at this point, just being transported over the border.
I'm gonna come back without a kidney.
Yeah, ice bath.
So they drive me into California, and I have an emergency MRI, and they don't find anything. They don't see anything. They're like, we don't know why this is happening. But now they're getting very concerned because there's like a very short period of time under which I can stay paralyzed and not like completely never recover.
Right.
So like it was kind of a race against the clock at that point. And so they decided to do another MRI with like a resonance contrast solution. So they like inject you with an IV solution. And so they do the MRI and they find a tumor on my spinal cord, like between, I think it was like T9 through T11. It was like 2 vertebrae, and it was growing off so there's a bone that encases your spinal cord called the laminis. And basically the tumor grew off the bone into the spinal cord. And so when we were swinging the pickaxe, the spinal cord shifted and the tumor shifted and put pressure on the spinal cord and just shut everything off from the waist down.
Okay. This makes sense now.
Yeah. So then they call the top neurosurgeon in San Diego. He was on call and he was out at dinner or something in San Diego, and luckily had not been, he was on call, so not drinking.
Right.
And so he like left the dinner, came over, scrubbed in, and they did an emergency laminectomy. So I got cut open I have probably like a 6 to 8 inch scar down the middle of my back where they kind of open it up, reveal the bone. They remove that bone segment where the tumor was. And luckily, because the tumor was growing off the bone into the spinal cord and not the other way around, it was a much cleaner extraction. And so they were able to get like the majority of the tumor through surgery. And then, then I had to recover. I had to gain the use of my legs back, which took about a month. So I spent about a month in the hospital in San Diego, and then maybe like 2 or 3 weeks in the hospital. And then they got me like to the point where I could walk with crutches, but like I wasn't getting full sensation back. It actually took a full year before I got like feeling back in the bottoms of my feet and like the tips of my toes. And it was weird. It was definitely a bizarre circumstance. And then I had to fly back to Philadelphia, where I was going to get all of my chemo and radiation. And like during this 2 weeks is when they were also doing all of like the pathology to figure out what in the hell I even had. And they found out that I had a super rare form of bone cancer called Ewing sarcoma, which, if anybody's a Hockey Life fan, Oscar Lindblom on the Philadelphia Flyers, he had the same thing this year. He was diagnosed, he had surgery, went through chemo and radiation, and then actually came back and played in the playoffs.
Wow.
So that's crazy, because
that is really crazy based on what you just described. Yeah. Well, let's pause for a second, because I think I've got several follow-up questions now based on the information you just gave us. First thing is, you are in San Diego in a hospital for a month. Um, how do you communicate with your parents and your sister? Like, what walk me through, because mental health, right? So what are they thinking? Like, do you tell
Oh,
them? Did a doctor tell them? Like, how did that go?
so a doctor told them, and
Okay.
actually, so like this was an interesting situation, right? Like, so like obviously my mom finds out I'm about to have surgery, and Paulette, like, she ends up like, immediately goes to the airport without a ticket, buys a ticket,
Yeah.
like just and so she's like at the airport and she's on the phone with the doctor. Now the doctor is they're holding the phone up to his head while he's like scrubbing.
Like
And
inside of you. Oh, okay.
no, like, no, he was like scrubbing. And so my mom's like, well, okay, so I'm getting on a plane now. I'll be there in like 5 hours and then you'll do the surgery. He goes, oh no. He goes, I'm doing the surgery right now. He's like, I'm just on the phone with you right now while I'm scrubbing in. He's like, we have to do the surgery immediately. So like, I had no communication with any of them. Like, I knew that people were getting in touch with them,
Yeah.
but like at this point, I hadn't really spoken to them very much because this was all really happening fast. Like, we're talking within 24 hours of getting to California, I ended up having surgery. Like,
You really did not want to build those houses.
I did not.
Yeah.
I did not.
I mean, is your mom, not that I would think she should feel this way, but was there guilt there? I mean, did she associate this trip at all with this happening, or
No,
understand that it probably wasn't correlated?
I think the understanding was there that I had already had this back pain for a while, and the doctors were just saying, you're 17, there's no reason to think there should be anything wrong. Like, it was a pretty bizarre thing. Like, I mean, so I don't think my mom really. I mean, I think my mom carried a lot of guilt for other things,
Yeah.
like during all of it. Like, she took on a lot. Like, my dad took on a lot. Like, I have to say, like, my dad's company was awesome about it. Like, they basically took the cap off of my dad's health insurance. Like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, because I mean, this was going to be. I mean, just the first month was $1.5 million. Like, and then I would say you were like the chemo and radiation for 9 months was probably about $1 million a month.
That's good to know for other people in case, I mean, this is, yeah, there's a lot bigger of a story there when you give out those numbers as to what it costs to get a human being through cancer in this country.
Yeah.
But what about for you? I mean, you go from one day you have back pain to now you can't feel anything or stand up
Yeah.
to now you're diagnosed with cancer. I assume the doctors were like, hey, by the way, you have cancer.
So no,
Okay.
no,
Maybe
they
not.
did not actually. So this was actually a thing. So when after I had the surgery, right? Like, I go out, they do the surgery, they see the tumor. The tumor, so the type of cancer that I have apparently has a very distinct look to the tumor. So the doctors knew what it was when they did the surgery, and so did all the medical staff. And I could feel that there was like this thing that they didn't really want to tell me until they had the pathology back from the actual tumor itself.
They
But
wanted
that,
the
like,
full story.
everybody knew something that I didn't, and it got to a point where I was getting really freaked out, and my parents hadn't arrived yet, and I got angry. I was like, tell me right fucking now. Like,
Yeah.
and what they said was, they said, look, we don't know for sure, but it looks like a form of cancer that we have seen, and so we want to really make sure before we say anything. But at that point it was like, okay, so I either have a very rare looking benign tumor, or I have this rare cancer that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then there was like the period of waiting to find out was like 10 days. Like, it was a while. It took a while to get the pathology back. And
So
so
you
kind
get
of in
told by the
limbo, and it definitely sends you through a mental loop, man. Cause like, that's that thing, like, you sort of game out scenarios, like, it's just like it sends you for a trip. I would actually say once the diagnosis came back, I was like almost relieved. It was just like, okay, now I know what it is. Now I know what I'm dealing with. And the I would say the majority of the mental stress that came out of the cancer had mostly to do with situational things. It wasn't as much like I was just kind of along for the ride. And this is sort of one of the things that I ended up doing as a coping mechanism, that it backfired on me down the line, and it worked while I was in it. And I think, when you hear people that talk about PTSD, they often say that they feel like they're just like white knuckling life. Like, like when you're on a really stressful drive and you're just gripping the steering wheel real tight and you're tunnel visioned. And so you like compartmentalize off the feelings. And for me, it was always a situation where like I felt numb. Like it was so much overload and so much going on. And I felt like a fucking pin cushion. Like,
Yeah.
I was getting stuck. Once they did the surgery and it became clear I had to have chemo, I had to have a central line IV put in so they could inject drugs directly into my heart instead of going through my veins, because chemotherapy is extremely corrosive. And so you can't just certain chemotherapy you can't administer through a vein. You have to go through an artery.
What was that plane ride back from San Diego to Philadelphia? Because now, like, you're like, I have cancer. My family is, I assume, at that point with you, right?
Yeah.
Because they flew out there and then you go back there. What is that plane ride like? Like, what's
Well,
going through your head at 17 years old when you're going through this, and probably no one else or have even heard of is going through it at the same age?
one person,
Okay,
and
that's
I went
good.
to
That's
high school
probably
with her.
better than most. Yeah.
I went to high school with her. She had the same thing that I had at the same time. It was bizarre.
Oh, well, that I don't want to say that's fortunate you ate to have two of them, but for you, that was probably a comforting thing in a way, right?
Yeah, I think to some degree. But then so her situation was significantly worse than mine. And
Okay.
that was always something that I think helped keep me in check. Like, you get to a point where, you, you start to get angry and
Yeah. Are
things
you
like
also
that.
questioning, like, did it get to the point where you're questioning your mortality at all, or are you just like, this is just going to
Definitely.
suck, but I'll get through it?
So, no, I think definitely, I think what you have to wrestle with, and ultimately for me, what it came down to is you have to just make peace with it. Like, it's like, look, you don't have the control. So it's like trying to, one, being upset about it gets in the way of whatever you got left, if that's the case. So at the end of the day, I kind of always felt like it was like, okay, so I can't control this. I have like, all I can do is go along for the ride. And so hopefully at the end of this, I'll come through. And my specific type of this cancer was much more treatable than some of the other places where this cancer shows up in the body. So
Okay.
I had a relatively simple case to to diagnose, treat, and then use chemotherapy and radiation to reduce. And
What stage were you in, or does it not work like that?
so I'm trying to remember. They didn't really give it a stage, like not that I remember. They what they referred to it as was a peripheral neuroectodermic tumor. It is what they said, and that all that just means that it grew off of that bone into the.
Right.
But I think they gave me, it was like an 85% chance that I'd probably come out okay.
Okay.
So I mean, my chances were better than not, but
Yeah, but you're still
15%.
17 with a 15% chance of not getting through it, right? Like
Yeah,
that I feel like is where a lot of people's heads would go.
definitely. And so like I early on I kind of decided like whatever happens, and I'm gonna try to at least enjoy what I can. And I mean, I spent that year, I spent 111 days in the hospital.
Wow.
Yeah. And like 3 weeks of that was in the ICU, with a very, very, very bad infection. Almost went septic. It was like very bad.
Wow. So almost 4 months in the hospital. I imagine that a lot of that time they're doing tests, or is that where the physical trauma was coming in with that and the
So
radiation and everything?
definitely. Okay. So where do I start? Uh,
Yeah, next
let's
chapter.
see. So fun fact about radiation is when, well, first of all, radiation in 2002 is a lot different than radiation now. They've been able to much more target it. But so to get to the location where my tumor was, they had to kind of shoot through a cross section of my body that also had my heart and uh, my esophagus.
Yeah,
And
two totally
so,
unimportant things.
yeah. So while I was on radiation, I did not eat solid food for about 7 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, I
It,
gotta tell you, that alone for me, I'd be like, I don't know if this is worth it.
well, I mean,
I'm weak
trust
like
me,
that.
there were definitely, I mean, like, look, I'm not gonna, like, not to get dark or anything, but there were certainly times where you're like, you know what, like maybe the alternative is better. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, at least
there were some
easier,
really
right?
bad, there were some really bad moments. Like, I mean, what I will tell you is, I was 17 when I got diagnosed, which meant that I had to go to a children's hospital.
Yeah,
And
and you're like the oldest one there.
yeah, I was one of three 17-year-olds. There were three 17-year-olds, and then probably, maybe 200 children, like as young as 18 months, as old as, 11 or 12, like 13, 14.
Yeah,
You
so
know?
you're
So that's tough. That's a tough, and me being 17, like I'm a bit more aware of like what's all going on around me. Whereas like some of these kids, they don't really understand it as much as,
yeah,
more of an adult would. And so I think to some degree, I think there was a lot of trauma there. And I mean, there throughout the whole, like, it was like 9 months total. Like, basically treatment started in August and ended in May. So I don't know, whatever that is. It's like
yeah,
um
9 months.
9 months. Yeah. I mean, in 9 months there were, I will tell you, I don't remember all of it. I was heavily medicated. I mean, I think that's probably one of the things that was probably in some ways a blessing, and then in other ways not so much a blessing.
Yeah,
Um, in the sense that I was on so many medications that now, like, the standard pain medicine that most people would get just does not work for me.
right.
Like,
Yeah,
I mean, I told you, I mean, I was on at that one point. I mean, not for the cancer part, but for the later part, for the escalator, which we'll get to. I was on heavy opiates because they had given me. So I told you that I was in the ICU with that really bad infection, and they had given me this medication that is it's an antibiotic, but it's an old sulfate drug from World War One that was really common. It was called amphotericin B, and it has a nickname in the pharmacology industry. It's called amphoterrible because a lot of people have like horrible allergic reactions to it. And so they gave me amphotericin for I had fluid in my cardiac wall that was building pressure, and it felt like I had like an elephant standing on my chest, like, just like, it was brutal. And I was on Route 1. I was driving down Route 1 and I couldn't breathe, and I pulled over and I called my dad, and my dad drove from Piscataway and met me on the side of the road and then drove me to hospital.
wow.
So yeah, no, so but so like while that was all going on, they put me in the ICU. They gave me this antibiotic, and my blood pressure dropped to 40/29. My core temperature dropped to 94 degrees. Like, I was freezing. Like, I mean, just like, it was crazy. And I felt like something was so wrong. And initially they thought I was having a heart attack. They were like, oh my God, like, this kid's gonna have a heart attack. So they brought the crash cart in because they weren't sure if I was about to code or what. And then they realized that they had given me this drug, and they're like, holy shit, he's having a massive allergic reaction. And so the way that they counteract it is they shot liquid Demerol straight into my heart.
Holy shit. You're 18 at this point?
Yeah, by that time, yeah, I was 18.
Yeah. Wow. So, I mean, the way you're describing it is such a peculiar situation because, you know, you're 17, 18 years old. So we all know how we are at 17, 18 years old. Like, that is the top of your life at that point. But you are going through something that is obviously much worse than that. And then at the same time, you're going through this, and everyone around you seems to be going through something worse. So, like, it's, you know, it must have been hard for you to be like, I should feel bad for myself, but if I do, I also feel guilty. Like, that's kind of how I'm seeing it. Was that what it was like?
Well, what I would say is I didn't feel much of anything. And
from the medication or just mentally?
It's both. I mean, you know, to some degree, right? Like, the medication, it kept me in a place where, you know, I was still kind of aware what was going on, but I'd lose time. Like, there were days kind of blended together, and, you know, there were times people would be like, oh, you know, it was so good to see you, like, last week, and I'd be like, I don't remember seeing you last week. Like, you know, and, like, just, like, you know, stuff like that was a little scary, and, like, just kind of like, all right, I guess, you know, shit. But I also, like, you know, there were times where I was very cognizant of what was going on, and, you know, I mean, the body, I've done lots of therapy since you know, since all of this, and what I kind of started to understand is, like, understanding the parasympathetic nervous system a little bit more, and sort of, you know, when you're in that fight or flight mode where you're being, you know, you feel like you're being attacked, right? Like, you know, you have, like, where I told you, like, that white knuckling. You know, I white knuckled life for probably 3 years. Like,
I was gonna say, how long was the after? I mean, did you immediately start seeking therapy after this, or?
It took about a year. I thought I had it good. I thought I had it okay. Like, I had still graduated high school and still gotten into college. So, like, I completed my senior year of high school.
Like, in a hospital?
Yeah. Like, I mean, I basically read the books, took the tests, wrote the papers, but I did them from a hospital bed or my house. And then I would say, out of the, you know, 6 month or 8 month school year or whatever it is, I probably was there like 45 days that year.
How do the classmates, you know, how do the other students treat you at that point?
Well, I mean, I would say that I got treated better by people that like, the popular people. I got treated much better after I got cancer. It was,
you're a sympathy figure now.
Yeah. And so, like, I would get invited to the cool parties, and, like, you know, I was the cancer guy who, like, would show up, and, you know, I would drink, like, a beer and be hammered, but I was also on, like, Ativan.
Is that hard? Was that hard for you to deal with? Because you, like, a part of you're like, they're full of shit. Like, I know this.
Yeah.
But, I mean, okay.
So, like, to some degree, yes, but to some degree, no. Like, there was also, like, you know, I think there were, like, I've remained friendly with many of those people. So, like, I wouldn't, like, say that it was all, like, you know, like, it wasn't all bullshit, but, like, just, like, you know, my class was, you know, I mean, like, a lot of classes are, there's like the cliques, you know, and I was always, like, the floater. Like, I was always, like, you know, I was cool with people. Like, there's nothing like that, but, like, I didn't, like, sit at the popular table, you know.
Right.
you know, like I had my people. I liked who I hung out with, so I didn't give a shit. Like it was fun. I went to prep school, so it was, you know, everybody.
Yeah. Okay. So you get through school now. You go into therapy. 3 years, you said. Were
Well,
you immediately diagnosed with PTSD, or are you dealing with this stuff before you know what's going on?
so I was dealing with it for about a year before I kind of really said I think I need to like see somebody about it. Like so,
Yeah.
like you know, a lot of stuff would come at night. Like you know, it was funny. The first 6 months, I thought I was like all set. I thought I was fine. It was good. And then I started having like bad dreams. That was what it started with. Is I would have dreams about stuff that I remember. Like the stuff that I remember is not the good stuff. Like
Yeah.
you know, you don't spend 9 months on a pediatric oncology ward without seeing some pretty horrible things. Like,
I was gonna say I don't want to get too morbid, but I mean, are you seeing like children dying in your sleep, or like their faces? Like what? How dark? Okay, so it went that dark.
yeah,
Okay, and then you're like, I have a problem.
yeah, and then I was trying to find anything that I could to try to like kill that, like you know, so you know, and then you know, then it would get to the point where I couldn't sleep, and they had given me medication to sleep, Ambien, and I don't know if you're familiar with what happens if you don't fall asleep after you take Ambien, but it very much puts you into a like psychedelic, half awake, half dreaming state.
Hmm.
And your brain can go to some very, very dark places. And so I learned that I needed to stop taking Ambien, but not before like some pretty bad shit happened. And I was smoking a lot of weed at the time because it was at least helping me like sort of calm down before I would go to bed. But I'm in a college dorm, and then I ultimately ended up getting in trouble, and then that's when
Smoking weed or for other stuff?
for smoking weed.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, and so basically, I took a 6 month medical withdrawal from the university, and then I went back to New Jersey, and I started seeing a therapist twice a week. And
Wow.
yeah, so I went every week, twice a week, and then I had gotten a job while I was back there, and then I was taking classes at the college in New Jersey, and then I transferred the credits back to GW when I went back. And so basically, in 6 months, I went to therapy twice a week. You know, I was working a job that was like decent. I was working at a country club in Lawrenceville, and you know, like I still hadn't quite bought into like everything, but like the therapy at least helped me to kind of figure some better ways to sort of cope with these things that were slightly less destructive.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and clearly, like you know, like the doctor had even said to me, like you know, marijuana's like not really that big problem. Like he's like obviously he's like you're clearly having these bad dreams. You're trying to use substances to kill that, but like we need to talk about that more. And so you know what I found is that talking about some of this stuff in a structured format was really helpful because once you kind of let it go, it stops eating at you subconsciously. And so like, you know, I experienced guilt, you know, for why I survived, but yet these other people did not. I
Yeah.
told you that I went to school with another girl who had it. Well, she passed away. I mean, she did die. So like it was really hard when she died because I had a hard time looking her parents in the face. I think that was the biggest challenge. I think was like, you know, I mean, what do you say?
Right.
Like, I mean, yeah, like what do you say to the parents of somebody who died from the same thing that you had, and you're still standing there? That's I didn't know how to reconcile that, and so you know, I mean, I did. I think I sent them an email at one point, and I just, you know, I just told them I was thinking about them. But you know, tough situation, man. I mean, you know, there's stuff like that. The ones that messed me up the worst were the little kids.
Yeah.
And those were the ones where sometimes I still like see the faces. Like I can still picture that.
So obviously therapy helps you kind of sort these feelings out, maybe resolve some of them. What are the coping mechanisms with PTSD in particular? Because you described it as a white knuckle experience. Are there any other symptoms I should ask first? And then besides that, how do you deal with that? Like what do you do to get through your day?
So, I mean, I have found for me, I mean, I'm a medical marijuana evangelist. I mean, for pain things, for anxiety stuff, for the PTSD stuff, medical marijuana has been really helpful as a way to kind of bring myself out of that elevated state. So like, excuse me.
Should also remind everyone that you're going through this like circa 2003 to 2005 when medical marijuana was not quite yet what it is today, where most states are, pretty okay with it.
Right. Very true. Very true. I happened to be in Washington, D.C., where they were getting ready to pass it. And so like, ultimately, like when I got in trouble for pot, it never went through like police or anything. It was just like I got like a slap on the wrist at the university, and they were like, "Go start your shit out for 6 months, and then we'll let you back." So, it was sort of I mean, I've definitely done stupid shit in my life, like we all have, I'm sure, to some degree. But other coping mechanisms for me have been music is a big one. I find one of the things that I deal with is it's like, so, I mean, me, like I can be funny and I can be sort of interactive and charismatic, but when there are times where I go into situations and I feel alone in a crowded room is the best way I can explain it. Is like I never really feel like I'm constantly feeling like I want to get out. Like, and so like there are times where if I go somewhere with my friends, like I don't vibe with certain types of places. Like I got friends that love to go to like nightclubs or like, these very busy hustle bustle bars like that are trendy. And I can't stand that. Like I constantly feel like I'm in the way. I constantly want to get out of there. And like, I have like it feels like it's almost an anxiety. Like it builds to a point where like, I feel it in my throat and it's like, that's where I start to, I'm like, I just need to get out of here. And like, there have been times where I've gone out with my friends and we've done something and I've done the old Irish goodbye,
Yeah. Which you should be a master at. Are there triggers to that? You mentioned going to nightclubs. Is it like crowded places? Is that a trigger for you?
Crowded places, definitely. I do not like big crowds. I generally feel uneasy in large crowds of people.
That's why you're not downtown right now, which by the way, tonight is the night.
I'm not dancing at the White House at the moment.
Yeah, tonight is the night Biden got selected, I guess you could say, just for those of you since this isn't live. But
allegedly.
Okay. Yeah, allegedly. We'll wait another 9 months until the lawsuit's settled. So large crowds, is there anything else is there a correlation there too? I mean, was it like crowded in the hospital or is it just something random that manifested itself?
I think to some degree it's the stimuli. Like it's like, I think, like I said, is like when you're going through all the chemo and everything, it's like everything's kind of flying by and, you're just kind of along for the ride. And like, I think for whatever reason, it's like that vibe felt similar. And like, this is weird. I constantly felt like I was in the way. Like I am always looking to try to get like into a corner or like, you know, I try to position myself in those places where I'm not like perceptively like in the thick of it. I try to immediately get to a corner, a side. But what's weird is I love going to concerts.
That is weird. Like for me, I don't have PTSD that I know of. I don't like live music because for me that's like it's too loud, it's too much. Whether it's I'm eating dinner or whether I'm at a concert, I in that regard it bothers me, and I don't have this condition presumably. But for you, that actually helps you, or you're just okay with it.
I think it's because I study music and music's a big part of what like I do. I tend to, when I'm at concerts, what I like about the concert is feeling the music. I love,
Okay.
where that bass like reverberates through the body. I love that. What do they call it? The major climb and the minor, the minor.
I can't help you with that one.
The minor fall. Sorry, the minor fall and the major lift.
There you go.
I love that sort of, like where, like, how I like how music can be a very kinesthetic, cerebral experience. And so, like, for me, like I always say, like, I've told you, I'm a medical marijuana evangelist. I'm also a music evangelist. Music is my religion. That's what I believe in. I believe in music.
I think that's going to click with a lot of people in this group because I know other people who are like that as well. Okay, so music's a big help. That's a coping mechanism for you.
Yeah, definitely.
So your body in general, right? Because now you're like 21 at this point.
Yeah, like 22.
22. You had a few years of peace before anything else happened to you. Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, I had a solid good run from May of 03 to like April 2010.
Okay. What happened in 2010?
I had been down in New Orleans for the BP oil spill. I was down there covering. I covered from Galveston, Texas to like Pensacola. Like I covered like that ground through southern Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. The best parts of America.
Yeah. Great people.
Yes, I mean there are some good people there, but so I had been down there for about 11 days and had been covering energy politics at the time. So obviously the BP oil spill was kind of a biggie for us.
Yeah, it's like the Super Bowl.
So I get back from that trip and I go across the street to get a haircut. And before I had left for the trip, I had just gotten a new car. And so I was gonna go to the barbershop and get my head shaved. And on my way out of the shopping center, the stoplight had gone out. There was a major power outage, and so it becomes a four-way stop if you're not a moron. And unfortunately, I met the moron that day, and so this woman, she wasn't paying attention, and she blew through the intersection at 45 miles an hour. And she took off the front end of my car from the tires forward, like basically the front tires were still intact, but everything else in front of it, the whole front bumper got peeled off.
Just gone.
The hood flew, like the hood was still attached, but was like folded in half. And the entire engine block had shifted about 6 inches.
Wow. Airbags, I assume?
Oh, yeah. And so I got spun around like 3 or 4 times in that.
Okay.
And I hurt my back. I was definitely in some pain for probably 6 months. And then about 6 months, I started to feel a little bit better. And within, I think probably I was like 100%, but like within like a year and a half, it took like to get like full pain went away. I was back playing golf. I was doing all that shit, and it was good. And then, you know, like it was like early, maybe like late 2011 at that point, you know, 2011, like things were good. And then I had a job. I was working in DC on Capitol Hill covering energy politics. And then in 2015, I go to work one day and I'm on the escalator at the subway station. Escalator goes from full speed to no speed, and I take a 30-foot header head over heels down the escalator. And I ended up with 6 bulge discs and at least 2 pinched nerves that we were able to figure out.
What is that? It's weird. What is that like to fall 30 feet in an escalator?
So what's crazy? Like, so you know how like you hear people say that like, oh, it happened in slow motion?
Yeah.
Yeah, it happened in slow
Really
motion.
did. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, like there was, I remember this at one point. So like the only thing that I could think to do. So like, I was holding on to a railing, but it went like, I mean, talk about, it went from full speed to a stop in less than a second, and we had video of it. It's like it looks like this thing goes from an escalator to stairs in less than a frame.
So it just catapults you, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, this is a physics problem at this point, you know?
What was that, a malfunction?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
So did you go down the entire thing?
About two-thirds of it.
About 2/3 of it, and you land on a step, I assume?
Yeah, it was weird. I actually landed, so I started off going this way, right?
Yeah.
Somehow in the process, I did a turn. And when I landed on my stomach, looking back up the escalator, and I caught my feet. I was wearing work boots, and so I caught my work boots on the escalator steps. And that's how I stopped myself. And then I like stumbled the rest of the way down, and then there was a station manager that was like standing there, and he saw that I had blood coming down my face. Like it was very bad. But like I made I had 2 very conscious thoughts when, well, I had 3 very conscious thoughts going down head over heels. The first was, holy shit. The second was, duck your head in and like curl up.
Right, because that could kill you if your head's exposed.
And then the third thought was I should do that so that I don't kill myself. And there was definitely a time where I was during it where I was like, this could be it. This could be how I go out, like straight up. And you know, I mean, luckily I was okay. The EMTs that showed up were shocked that I was not like more fucked up.
Right. I mean, I would be shocked if you weren't, like, I guess I wouldn't be shocked if you weren't dead, but I would be shocked if you weren't just like crippled from that, you know?
Right. Yeah,
like that sounds like a full body injury.
I probably should have been, honestly. Like, I mean, I got lucky. I mean, you know, this is the thing, right? Is like people always say to me, man, you got this rare cancer, you know, you've had all these things happen. And you know, like my answer to, you know, well, you know, how did you like, what did you think about having cancer versus what did you think about falling down this escalator and living? Or what do you think about, you know, having gotten, you know, basically your case sabotaged in court and then you lose in federal court after 5 years? The answer that I give is I'm just lucky, I guess.
Yeah, well, there's a kernel of truth there, right? I mean, you're fortunate you got out of the situations you were placed in the way you did.
Yeah.
Other people who haven't been in those situations would obviously say you're unfortunate to be in those situations, but
yeah, definitely.
You know, you as the survivor, yeah. I mean, I could see how you would think there's a little bit of luck there.
I wanna stress this. So this escalator had been running fine for 3-4 hours since it had been turned on that day. And then it was a 30-second window. if I had stopped to tie my shoes, if I like, there are so many what ifs that I could play back. Like if I had stayed at my house for 20 more minutes, if I
Right.
had left 20 minutes earlier, there's so many what ifs. It's chaos. Like there is no sense trying to like run down mentally all the things that you could have done, because the answer is none of them matter. At the
Right.
end of the day, what happened happened. And like I jokingly say I'm lucky, but like I should have gone out and bought lottery tickets the day that I nailed the moment the escalator was going to malfunction.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Are you very much of the kind of mental stature now that like everything else is gravy for you, like going forward, or you just like the longer I live, like the better off it's going to be,
so
or is it not
no,
quite that
no.
rosy? Okay.
I would say, if anything, I'm very cautious. I'm more cautious now. I think I do not. I try very hard not to put myself into situations where I might injure myself, because
Yeah.
the reality is like I deal with arthritis because of all of the shit that has gone on with my back, and that's especially coming into the wintertime. The wintertime for me is like the worst time of year, which is part of the reason why I'm trying to relocate to a slightly warmer climate.
You coming down here?
Well, I mean, like at this point, like where I'm at is I will go anywhere where there is a job that will pay me enough money to live reasonably. I don't give a shit what state it's in at this
Yeah.
point. I just like it to be a medical marijuana state, like, or a
We've
legal
got that.
state.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I'm
Only
not, I'm
medical.
not very thrilled with the Florida program. I've been helping a woman who had she had a massive stroke, and she lives right outside of like Tampa, like in like Seminole area, and she's on the program down there, and like only recently has she been able to get access to gummies.
That doesn't surprise me. We just passed it, I think, in like 2018, maybe
Right.
2016.
Yeah,
So
and when it started off, you could only get the vape pens, and those are good, but they're not what I need for the pain relief. Like
yeah.
they're good for anxiety and like helping for that, but the oils and stuff, they don't help me for pain. For me for pain, it's either edibles, tincture, or flower, and usually it's a combination. Sort of
You got
like flower is more immediate relief. The tinctures and things like that tend to be more like that long acting medicine.
okay.
But so like falling down the escalator, then I like had horrible pain. Like I was in like the worst pain I've ever been in. I would tell you, like, if I had to choose which recovery to do again, cancer or escalator fall,
Yeah.
I would take cancer every single time.
Really? It was
Yeah,
that painful.
absolutely. Cancer didn't bring me to my knees the way that this did. Like,
Yeah.
there were days I didn't think I was getting back up. Like, there were just days where, I mean, like, think about the mental stress of being in excruciating pain every single day for 3 years with no relief.
That's what it was. Even with marijuana.
This is on fucking opiates. I wasn't even
Yeah.
on marijuana yet.
Yeah.
This was with oxycodone. I was on a nerve opiate. I would take my medicine at like 8 o'clock. Like I had to get up at 5 a.m. to take medicine so that I could drive to work at 9 a.m.
And man, that's so just excruciating pain. What was healing? Like what was going on in your body during those 3 years? Just all of the damage that was caused?
Yeah, I mean, it was all the nerves. I mean, really, the majority of the pain was nerve pain, and then I was having, so I had my L4 and L5 got impinged, and so I was getting this. It was crazy. It was nerve pain that would start in my like lumbar spine, and it felt like somebody stuck a knife in my back and was just twisting it, and like to the point where like it hurt to breathe.
Yeah.
I'm not like, that's not being facetious. Like, just
Right.
drawing a normal breath was painful.
What do you do mentally to cope with that? Because that's a battle in itself.
I white knuckled again. I mean, I went right back to what I knew how to do, which was to kind of compartmentalize my brain. And, I would try to keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Just
I've told you my sort of my coping mechanism tends to be the default of comedy. Like, I tend to joke about things, when people say, "Oh my God, falling down an escalator, what's that like?" I say, "I don't recommend it." Like,
yeah.
you know,
It just you're in survival mode again at
yeah,
that point. Yeah.
and so, like, I've lived, so from between like 2002 till 2020, I probably, or let's call it 2017, when I finally had the last surgery and switched to medical marijuana. That's when
Yeah.
the real bad pain finally stopped. But so, I mean, so what? 2015 to it was really 2018, like the end of 2017, middle of 2018. That's when things kind of started to get much better.
Yeah.
So, like, that's what, 2.5 years of just constant pain there,
Right.
coupled with, the white knuckling of everything else. Then there's the financial stress. There's so, like, I kept my job. I kept my great, 6-figure job that was awesome, that I didn't have to do a whole lot, and I was getting paid great.
Yeah. It's the best
But,
kind.
but it was getting to the point where the pain was so bad. I was having to call out of work. I was on FMLA. It just I wasn't getting any better. It was getting worse, and, like, the
Right.
pain was getting worse, and the mental stress started to really build at that point. And, like, my boss was very unempathetic of anything. Like, she was the kind of person, was like, she just thought I had a sports injury, and so she kept trying to tell me to work out, and I was like, you do not understand what you are
Right.
talking
Right. You're like, I'm mangled. Stop.
about.
Stop it. Yeah.
And so, like, that got bad, and then we started to have a very, like, abrasive relationship. And so I was getting ready to quit, and I ended up getting fired instead, which was awesome. Uh,
Yeah.
but and I got fired while I was at physical therapy, which was cool, because I had left all of my shit, like my house keys, in my office.
Oh, good.
So I had to have, like, I had to, like, call them and be like, listen, I understand that you need to go through, like, my shit, and, like, like, you're gonna have to give me my stuff later. I was like, but I do need the keys to my house and vehicle, and my personal effects, like my bag that I
Right.
brought into the office. I need those things. So they got somebody to give them to me, and, like, it was humiliating in some ways, like, getting fired like that. But I
Yeah.
will say that the day that I got fired, I felt the best that I had felt in 2.5 years.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
There was, like, definitely a big relief. It was, because I was ready to quit. I was like, this is just not going to work out anymore. I was, like, doing some freelancing. I had some freelance opportunities. So I was like, all right, well, if I can go freelance, I can work from home. I don't have to be as mobile. I don't have to go into the city every day, and definitely don't have to worry about commuting to work.
Yeah. So we'll have some parting thoughts here. As far as physical trauma goes,
Yeah.
what's your advice to anyone going through it or who will one day go through it?
Advocate for yourself. A lot of times you're going to meet doctors who don't agree that, the one thing that I will say is, especially, like, chronic, like, things like chronic pain, you're going to come across people who don't believe you, right? There are going to be people who say it's in your head, you're making it up, you're not really in pain. Trust yourself. If you're uncomfortable, and, like, you need to advocate for yourself. You need to find doctors. If a doctor is not going to listen to you, go to another doctor. Like, I found doctors that did like, I found a pain management specialist that was recommended by GW Hospital, who was the greatest champion of me. she was amazing. And like, I had a conversation with them. So first of all, you know, when you go through pain management with opiates, every month you have to go back to the doctor to get your prescription renewed, and then they
Right.
give you a drug test. The drug test serves two purposes. It makes sure that you're taking the drugs that they're prescribing you, and it makes sure that you're not taking anything that they're not. And so at this point, I had started to get interested in medical marijuana, but I knew, being a doctor affiliated with a grant hospital, my doctor would not recommend medical marijuana for me. But I wanted to talk to her about it, and I wanted to be like really upfront about it. And I was like, look, I would really like to try this to see if we can get away from the opiates and see if I can. So what she had said is what I want you to do was, she said, you can try marijuana to see if it does anything for the pain. And so like, I had her read a lot of documentation. I sent her a lot of what Sanjay Gupta wrote about medical marijuana, the entourage effect, and its effects on chronic pain, inflammation, PTSD. I mean, you know, if we could give every veteran marijuana legally for
Yeah.
PTSD, they would be in much better places.
Right. Speaking of PTSD, one word of advice there. If you, first of all, when would you think someone might have it, and what would you suggest to someone who does have it?
So what I would say is, if you find yourself getting, you know, so if you've had a traumatic experience, you know, I mean, this could be anything. Like, I mean, trauma manifests in lots of different ways. There's physical trauma, there's emotional trauma, there is, I guess emotional and mental trauma are probably similar or the same, maybe related. But like, you know, understanding that, like, you know, our body doesn't always know how to process things. And so if you start to notice that, like, you know, if you've had a traumatic event, a spouse died, a family, like a parent died, or, you know, you were in a terrible a car accident, or, you know, whatever the situation might be, I think if you start to feel like it's affecting you in a negative way, like I said, you know, for me, it really manifested its way. And I felt like I felt nothing. Like I could not have told you a discernible emotion that I felt other than anger and frustration, you know. But like, you know, I don't know. I don't know that I ever felt sad. I don't know that I ever felt happy. It was like just kind of this very vanilla feeling where, you know, and that's its own, they actually say it's its own form of depression. It's that you've spent so much time in that activated state. So if you find yourself feeling numb, not really being in a moment, you know, if you're kind of, you just kind of, you know, drift off. And one of the things I would say is, like, you know, one, bottling emotions is never good. That's one way that I tried to cope with some of the stuff with PTSD. Was I tried to override all the time. I tried to just kind of like compartmentalize and push it all down. And what I found is that would always come back on me, is that I would hold it inside until I couldn't, and then I would explode. And, you know, it's never where I really want to be. I was not my best person when I would get to that point. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time really trying to work on that, and just really like understanding when those like triggers are setting in, and just being like, it's okay to leave. If I don't feel comfortable, like, or I'm like, you know, if I start to feel like that, like where like my skin starts to crawl, or I like start to feel really uneasy where I am, like, that's when I will just like, I'll be like, you know, I'll go to whoever I know there, and I'll just be like, yo, I'm gonna get out of here. Like, it was good seeing you.
Yeah.
Take it easy. And, you know, I there have been times where I've Irish goodbye, like where I'm just like, I'm just gonna go ahead and get out of here. No big deal. No big deal.
Go to the bathroom right now. I'll be right back. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But like, I found that like sometimes extricating myself from a situation like that, then getting in the car, driving for me is very therapeutic. So like, I don't mind taking the road trip. Like I love driving. It's really calming for me, especially like, when I'm getting stressed out at work, like I find myself, I override sometimes at work because I have, X number of hours to get, you know, a greater number of hours worth of work to do.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like there's times where I can use that, I can use the the overriding that activated brain sort of to kill off the sort of, just stay tunnel vision. And I can use that now in healthier ways to do things like work. And then what I've also done is I take a lot of time for myself now. I really, I have very, very firm boundaries with work. I tell people like, look, if you need me on a weekend, text me because I will not look at my email.
Yeah.
Like, if I look at my email, I will be subconsciously checking it, over a weekend.
Right. It never leaves you. Yeah.
It never leaves. So what I have done is I've made it a real clear boundary. I work 5 days, I'm off 2 days. And if you're going to bother me on a weekend, it better be important. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
And I've heard, you're aware of all of the crazy shit with my boss and my boss.
We've spoken about that. Yeah.
It's still all ongoing. I hope she'll be fired on Monday, but
right. You're like, I have to hold her hand as part of my job. Yeah.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that would be what I would say is, you got to find out what works for you. I think being open about talking to somebody is really helpful. Like if you start to see those symptoms where you're feeling like, you're overriding a lot, you're not really in touch with like what's going on, and you're just kind of trying to get to the next thing. And like, it's just go talk to somebody, like, honestly, like get it out of your body, and then the anxiety level will go down. It will help. And, I've learned a lot about how my brain works and like how my body reacts to things. Like, I always jokingly say the world keeps trying to find ways to kill me, and yet here I am. And so, I'm sort of like a cockroach.
Just hanging around. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, that won't take up any more of your night, but thank you very much, Doug, for joining me and talking about this very serious stuff. I think it's going to resonate a lot with people, whether it's advocate for medical marijuana, whether it's cancer survivor, trauma, PTSD. I mean, you've overcome a lot. You have a lot to be proud of. We all love you here with, Merck and Deddy's in all of our states. We all love you. So you ever need anything, feel free to reach out. But
I always get very lovely IMs from your mom on Facebook.
She tells me it's always something like, oh, that Doug, he's so sweet. It's just like every single time. So yeah, he had something going on, right?
Likewise, Vince,
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. But thank you for joining us. Have a good night. Have a good rest of your night.
Sounds good, man.
All right. See ya.
Bye.